She's from Scranton and has quite a cool gig. Lynn Braz is a flying trapeze artist and recently wrote Flying Free, Life Lessons Learned on the Flying Trapeze. Lynn, welcome to PA Live. Nice to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's great to be here.
Well, this is pretty interesting. Explain how you got into doing stunts on the flying trapeze. You don't necessarily run into a flying trapeze artist from Scranton every day.
Well, I think there are going to be many more of us after people see and hear about this. I have a terror of heights. And actually, I'm a very fearful person, and my fears have held me back a lot in life. And I happen to have lived in the Bay Area, where there are 3 flying trapeze schools. And I have an athletic background, so I knew physically I could do this sport. And one day, just to push myself, I tried it. And it's brought me tremendous gifts.
And when you do this, now you're up there, I mean, many, many feet up in the air. You use the vehicle of working on the trapeze as a way to overcome fear and perfectionism. Tell us about that.
Well, for me, at a certain point, once, like, standing on the board was the hardest part, and once I jumped off the board and was actually flying, I was no longer afraid. And so every time I would go up there and that fear would kick up again, and I knew I was perfectly safe, I knew I wasn't afraid to do the trick. There was something else I was afraid of. And I realized pretty quickly the thing I was afraid of was not looking good. That it was the perfectionism, that I wouldn't do the trick well, that I would let my coaches down, that I was afraid of being embarrassed. And that was all about perfectionism. And I realized how much that held me back in life as a writer, that I can't write perfectly ever. And it's held me back in writing a novel. It's held me back in many, many ways. And facing this in flying trapeze has helped me here on the ground tremendously.
And one of the things you do now is you live in Scranton, but you often travel to New York City, and that's where you do your trapeze stunts.
Trapeze School New York, the best coaches in the world for this sport. Honestly, they've made it 1,000% safe. Hal Anderson is my coach. He's amazing, and I go every single week.
Now, you wrote a book. In addition to being on the trapeze, you also are trained as a journalist. You went to school for journalism, which is interesting. Tell us about your book that you wrote and some of the lessons that are in it.
For me, Flying Free, I have pursued a lot of different avenues of self-growth. And for me, when I looked at what I learned at Flying Trapeze about community, about being, maybe when I started out, I wasn't very good at trapeze, but I could be a good classmate and have a really rewarding experience by being there for someone else, by being able to serve other people standing on the board. We give each other the bar. Again, letting go of perfectionism, facing the fear. I realized it was the fear of fear that was holding me back. Like, I'd be fearful and be like, oh my God, I'm afraid, and freak myself out. At some point, I was like, so what? So you're afraid. It doesn't mean you can't do it. And then one of my coaches early on said, you know, Lynn, fear and excitement, they feel a lot alike. Maybe you're just excited. So there were so many lessons. Dressing the part. Like, I realized the gyms that we work out in the winter are very, very cold. And so I'd go all schlumpy, layered up, and I'd fly schlumpy. And at one point I realized, like, when I feel like I look good, I perform a lot better. And so, like, all these little things that seem like they're not consequential, but they are. And I've been applying them here on the ground, and my life has gotten better and better.
All right, a very inspirational story. I know you've also written for many national newspapers. Born and raised in Scranton, Lynn Braz, trapeze artist and, of course, author. How can people find out more about your book and you and what you've done in your career?
Well, thank you. My website is lynnbraz.com, LYNNBRAZ.com. My book is on Amazon. If you put in Lynn Braz, you'll get me. It's less than $10. And if you have Prime, it's, you know, free shipping. And there are videos, and come to class with me at Trapeze School New York.
Maybe that's the next step, as we do a feature story on the trapeze. Dave Kaharchik on the flying trapeze.
I'd love it. You'd love it.
Can't wait to try it. All right, Lynn Braz, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.